Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
Roland in Woolwich, hello there.
Hello, Sheila.
Hello.
Nobody wants to talk about the true cause of this housing crisis. It's uncontrolled immigration that has caused this crisis, and nobody wants to talk about it. It's Blair who opened the door for 3 million people to come here with their families. I came here in 1965, and you could buy a flat for 3,000, a house for 5,000. You sold it after 10 or 20 years for the same price. It's a question of demand and supply.
But which housing are you talking about? Because the reality is that migrants, and I've got a study in front of me that proves this, that migrants typically rent in the private sector, not take social. They don't take social housing.
Pushes up the price of houses and the price of renting. I mean, it's demand and supply. It doesn't matter whether the rent or the price of house shoots up automatically.
Yes, but you know that a lot of our immigration is necessary, don't you, Roland? That we need the numbers.
Yeah, but we could have had guest workers here, coming with single people, coming here for 2 years and go back. Don't keep them here with their families. You invite guest workers like the Middle East. Let them come here, work for 2 years, all single people.
They still need to live somewhere, Roland. They still need to live somewhere. They still need to live somewhere.
But single people are easier to accommodate. In one house, you can put 5 or 6 of them, whereas you put one family in one house. But why don't people argue about this fact?
Where do you live? What do you live like?
Well, I live in a house. I came here. I got married. My wife was a doctor. We produced 2 children. One went to Oxford, one went to Cambridge. We made our contribution, not breed half a dozen children or 12 children.
What's wrong with half a dozen children? I'm one of more than half a dozen children.
It's a burden on the state. They live on benefits. They cause enough problems.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. You don't have evidence for that.
Yeah, obviously the world is overpopulated. The greatest threat to the world is not global warming, it's overpopulation. Nobody wants to talk about these issues.
Well, we are talking about these issues. Look, we're doing it right now.
But you try to cover it up with the socialist thinking, you see. That's the problem. It's demand and supply. And what about affordable housing? It's another farce.
Well, also, demand and supply, let's increase the supply. You know, I mean, it's becoming increasingly obvious that we need an awful lot of the immigrants who are here. It's becoming increasingly obvious that Theresa May's claim to want to bring it down to the tens of thousands is probably not possible and likely completely unnecessary, given what our economy is doing and the fact that we want more growth. So, Roland, it isn't a case of people just coming here to steal our houses. People are coming here in the main to work. And post-Brexit, that will become more and more obvious because we'll be inviting them here on a different basis, it seems. I hope so anyway. Roland, thank you anyway for your call, Roland. In Woolwich, he's blaming the immigrants. Why does the far right seem to be thriving or beginning to thrive in continental Europe in a way that it isn't here in the UK? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. Dennis McShane, who just joined me for a few minutes, former Labour Minister for Europe, says it's simple, first past the post system. Boris Johnson, it says it's because Brexit showed people they are being listened to, the vote to leave the European Union. Which of them is right? Ryan in Chelmsford, hello.
Hello, Sheila. I'm really disappointed with the fact that you're not the only radio station. The entire media picked up on what Italy has done, but throughout the past few months, you've had great countries like Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Austria, and the EU threaten them with losing their votes, sanctions and fines because they're clamping down on immigration. And as for the British being, it's all gone away with the British. No, it hasn't. We live in a society where if you say one thing, our great old police will come down on you like a ton of bricks.
What things?
The British are sorry?
What things?
What do you mean, what things?
Well, I say all kinds of things every day of the week and I don't have the police knocking on my door.
Okay, so if I stand up in Hyde Park on a Sunday afternoon on a soapbox and stand there and say, right, I think all Muslims should be forcibly repatriated back home if they're on a terrorist list or they've done anything wrong here, I would get arrested.
What if
very, very quickly.
Well, what if they're born here? This is home.
I'm sorry?
If this is home, they're born here. What then?
Is it? So someone's
Well,
home.
yeah. In the way that you know, my parents.
Home,
Oh, hang on. Go on.
In your own home, would you like to destroy your own home? No.
Of course not.
Exactly. So these people that are so-called born here, and if a dog's born in a stable, it's still a dog. Okay. At the end of the day.
Yeah, but Ryan, what can I? With respect, what you are you talking about terrorists or all Muslims?
I'm talking about the huge undercurrent in this country and across Europe. Okay, I did vote out to leave.
All right, no, but I'm asking you to be specific because you're saying things.
I'm gonna be specific
let me
now.
just a minute. You're
Okay.
bordering on hate speech, which is why I'm having to be very careful in my listening.
Okay.
When you say send them home, you mean terrorists or do you mean all Muslims?
Right. Anyone on the terrorist list, okay, the security forces are watching, they get deported. Whether they live here or not, they're sent away.
Where
These
to?
countries
Where
like-
to, Ryan? Be realistic. Where to?
Well, hold on. You've got countries like Poland and Hungary and the Czech Republic and Austria and now Italy, huge countries with huge influence, good people that are not stupid, that look at the UK, they've looked at France, they can see what's going on in Sweden's descended into almost civil anarchy now. Germany have got huge problems. They see this. And it's not Poles that are doing this. It's
Okay, Ryan, I'm going to leave it there because I don't trust you not to just say all Muslims out, frankly. I just feel that the direction of travel of that conversation is where that was going. I'm not even going to give you the opportunity to say it, but thank you for your thoughts anyway. You know, we can discuss the dangers of terrorism. We can discuss what we do with them. I share your concerns about returning jihadis. I still think we're too soft on returning jihadis, those we know about. And that's a problem as well. We should know more about the ones who have returned, whether they're 15-year-old schoolgirls or 35-year-old men who've beheaded people. I share your concerns about those things, but I'm absolutely never going to give airtime to somebody who is, I think, about to say all Muslims out. David Morland in Norwich, hello.
Good evening, Shelagh. Good afternoon, Shelagh. How are you?
I'm okay.
You calm down now.
Well, no, sir, I think it was he who needed to calm down. I'm just on my mettle on these things because, you know, he talked there, Ryan talked there about the police coming in if you say anything. No, they don't. But if you stand on a street corner or Hyde Park, whatever he was talking about, standing and saying these things and spout hate speech, then yeah, bring on the police, I say.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm on the phone now standing up and representing UKIP because I'm a senior UKIP man, and we're not the BNP, we're not right-wing extremists, and the position we're in at the moment, now you're probably well aware of this, as most of the country are now. On June the 23rd and 16, surprise, the Brexiteers won the vote. The political elite, you know, led by Cameron and the others, absolutely no way in a million years thought they were going to lose that referendum. And as a direct result of that, and I know this is an absolute fact, and I would never mention who I spoke to a senior politician who said apparently about 10 days after the Brexit vote, there was a gathering of senior members of all the parties behind closed doors, and what they basically said was, hang on, OK, everyone, we've got to do something now because the British public have listened to UKIP, we've got to get rid of them. And there has been, for the past nearly 2 years now, a concerted effort to stop the voice of the British people being listened to. So the public have obviously listened to the media.
Hang on, David, hang on. UKIP and its voters are part of the voice of the British people, and politics is always about taking out your opponents, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, but when, as you can't get back into we were blocked by the media, we couldn't get on to defend ourselves.
Come on.
Seriously.
Nigel Farage has got his own daily programme on LBC now, and he is never off television screens in America, here in the UK. Come on, David. I know he's just one man, but he's the face and voice still of UKIP, whether you like it or not, whether he likes it or not.
He represents himself now, Nigel. He's got his own interests at heart. But going forward, I mean, the people now listen to the media.
You've had how many leadership elections that we've covered?
We had sorry, can you repeat that? Sorry.
You've had how many leadership elections in UKIP that we've covered extensively?
I put hands up. Yeah, I admit that we've had internal problems.
No, but we've covered them. That's what I'm saying. We've covered them. You haven't been blocked by the media, so put that one to bed.
No, Sheila, that's been covered because it's hang on, you've got more problems. But remember,
it's the leadership of the party. It's the leadership of the party. It matters enormously. See Labour for details. We covered that too. We being the whole of the media.
The other parties have also had problems, but, their problems are hushed up. They haven't got into... Look at the problems they had with the Corbyn and Co. and his mob last year and the year before. That was really, really bad. The rest seems to have gone quiet. But, the British public, in simple terms, Sheila, the British public have not got a party at the moment that they can turn to and trust and listen to. Because
well, the election result would seem to suggest that party is the Conservative Party.
Well...
Just about.
Well, yeah, maybe just about. But
they've got a damn sight more votes than you have.
Are they telling the truth on Brexit? Are they telling the truth on anything? Are the public being told the truth on anything?
Well, there isn't one truth on Brexit, is there? There are ideas and policies and ways forward. There isn't one truth. It's not a religion, is it?
Well, there was one of your discussion earlier on this morning. This afternoon. What was the number one issue? Housing. What's the real reason for the housing?
Well, it's not immigration, but I know that's what you're about to say. David, thank you. David in Moreland. It's one pressure on one aspect of housing, the private rented sector, but it isn't the reason we've got a housing problem in this country. That's been in the making for decades now, but thanks for your call anyway, I think. Some of you asking what's in it for... Vladimir Putin to poison people on the streets of the UK, if indeed that's what's happened in Salisbury. Well, I suppose to send a message, given all the talk about Eastern Ghouta, given all the talk about what Russia has been doing in relation to the United Nations, what it's been doing in Syria, its cyber attacks on various elections, it wants to send a message that it doesn't care. It's not cowed, I would imagine. But then I'm not an international spy or warmonger or leader, so who am I to guess? John in Gravesend, hello.
Oh, that's really impressive. Good afternoon. I'd like to put the other side of the story. Germany gets 35% of its oil from Russia, 39% of its gas from Russia, 29% of its coal from Russia. The EU imports 62% of its energy. The budget for defence, which I'm sure this is aiming for, at $48 billion, is not far behind Russia's.
What's aiming for it? Sorry, what's aiming for it?
Well, I can't understand what gain there is from the Russian perspective for this drama. I mean, why not just run him down with a car accident? Why make it so obvious? Why make it such a juicy story? He was probably killed by a pizza. Well, will be.
Well, let's look. We don't know. I mean, it's. I don't know how often I can say it this hour, but we don't know exactly what's happened to kill these people. But it's to injure these people. But there's no surprise, and it can't be ignored that the Foreign Secretary has been speaking in the Commons about Russia in relation to this. So, I'm just reporting what's going on. I'm not making conclusions about how they were injured yesterday, but it's a fact, and it was a factor before Salisbury, wasn't it? It was a fact before Salisbury that we've been imposing heavy sanctions on Russia. It's a fact that we strongly believe that they murdered Alexander Litvinenko. It's a fact that this man, Mr. Skripal, let me get this right, his wife, his son, a brother-in-law, I think, as well. 3 members of his family have died in suspicious circumstances in the last 3 years. And now he and his daughter were found in desperate straits in the middle of Salisbury. John, there's a pattern here, isn't there?
It's a UK pattern, though, not a Russian pattern.
But in what sense? Or are we doing it?
Well, Mrs. May has just recently suggested or said that our own security forces services break the law.
When did she say that?
That was recently reported of either MI6 or MI5.
Mrs. May...
We're not perfect.
Well, no, when did you say that? Are you just making quotes and percentages up?
This was recent. I'd have to go back and research the actual statement. Because
so you're quite relaxed about the way Russia goes about its business in the world and at the UN, are you?
But as far as I'm concerned, Russia's generally the peacemaker.
OK, John. Thank you for your call. John in Gravesend. Let's hear from Marco in Ealing before we go to the news headlines. Hello, Marco.
Hi, Sheila. It always fascinates me how little time you seem to give to callers when they provide you with facts that you tend to disagree with the caller before the previous one you had on.
Marco, you're the third caller in 15 minutes. That doesn't suggest I'm not giving people much time.
First of all, regarding the detective who went over on an official visit to investigate the Litvinenko assassination, he got a tummy ache abroad, and now he's claiming that Putin's attempted to murder him. That's I mean, that's hardly... If they intended to kill him, I'm sure they would have. They had the opportunity there.
I think
Or
taken in its entirety, the interview with Brian Tarpey would tell you that Brian Tarpey's not a man who exaggerates or talks about things he doesn't know. And I think it was more than a tummy ache.
Well, we will never know, obviously. But in regards to the guys...
Doesn't stop you trying to imply he's a liar.
I didn't say it was a liar. I just said he fell ill abroad. I mean, everyone does. I fell ill last year in Egypt. I didn't say the president tried to have me killed, did I? But in regards
But then again, you weren't investigating a political assassination at the time, probably.
But if they were that against him investigating it, they wouldn't have let him in the country, Sheila. But then in regards also to the previous comment, when he mentioned all the trade the EU does with Russia, I mean, if he is as bad as they say he is, Putin I'm talking about, why would they be so openly willing to trade in all those natural resources? It's slightly hypocritical, surely, looking at it from that aspect.
Well, international relations are always a bit hypocritical, aren't they? And that's resources.
Yeah, that's true, absolutely.
You know.
But, I mean, also, I just find the position, for example, you mentioned with Syria. I mean, we have to also remember that the Russian army is there on the invitation, by the invitation of Assad, helping fighting terrorist groups that the West, Turkey, America, Britain are openly supporting, prolonging the civil war and the suffering for the people of Syria. He's there doing a lot more than we are in helping the fight against ISIS and all those other terrorist groups, al-Nusra, and all the others, you know, you could mention.
So you're kind of pro-Putin, essentially?
I'm not so against pro-Putin, Sheila. I would just say, I mean, what goes on... Also, I forgot to mention, sorry, the spy who was here, I forget his name, sorry. But one of the reasons why he was captured was because he gave a lot of names up of his comrades, ex-spies, spies working in Europe at the time. So I'd imagine he'd have a long list of people who were, you know, pretty angry against him. I wouldn't just say put it down to the Russian government wanting to maybe have him killed.
Well, we'll find out whether it was them, Russia, or a pizza, as my first caller suggested it might be.
It's 10:55. Phil's in Ealing. Phil, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I just want to talk about comparing Saudi to Iran, and probably the reason that we support Saudi is because we're not an expansionary power. If you look at Iran, they're active in...
what is Saudi doing in Yemen?
Well, no, so let me finish. The Iranians are active in Yemen, Iraq...
but the Saudis are in Yemen as well.
They are. If you look at the map, you'll find that Yemen is like Portugal is to Spain. It's the same landmass. They're a peninsula, and Yemen is... But
you said Iran are expansionists because they're in Yemen, and Saudi Arabia aren't expansionists, and I said, but they're in Yemen as well.
Well, you could take that. You could take that argument, but
it's not an argument, mate. It's a statement of fact.
Okay, Iran surrounds Saudi, and Saudi does not surround Iran.
Well,
Iran
that's geography.
An expansionary power. That's geography.
It's not going well, this, Phil.
Well, look at the map. What's happening in Yemen?
Allow me to ask why you rang in to defend Saudi Arabia and pose Iran as a worse... Are you? I mean, can I ask what your personal politics are?
I'm a conservative, but that's kind of beside the point, really. Saudi Arabia
is it? Because you said we when you rang in. You said we. Why do we support? Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked. So, what you've got on your little conservative crib sheet, is Iran is expansionist and Saudi Arabia is not. Therefore, we will be nice to Saudi Arabia and sell them lots of weapons while demonising Iran. And your line for explaining why Iran is expansionary, first line you used, they're in Yemen.
Lightning to the Saudis. In the noughties, Blair sold Typhoon to the Saudis.
We've already covered that the hypocrisy spans all regimes and all British parties. So I'm just intrigued. You'll forgive me for not letting you off the hook on this one. How can Iran's evidence of expansionary ambition be their presence in Yemen, and Saudi Arabia's presence in Yemen be proof that they're not expansionary?
Well, they're supporting the rightful government of Yemen, which is literally on the same landmass as they are, and the Iranians are supporting rebels to the established state.
But they're both expansionists, mate. They both are defending their own interests, they would argue, by supporting warring factions in a foreign country. Mate, I think you need to get back onto Central Office and find out what's supposed to be on page 2 of that crib sheet. Bless. Putin said at the time of his release, it was part of a prisoner swap, that he would kick the bucket. These people will kick the bucket. The daughter, though, becomes innocent. I don't know. I give Boris the benefit of the doubt. I think I'm allowed to give Boris the benefit of the doubt, given that I castigate him so roundly on a regular basis. I don't know that he misspoke there, or that he was in any way sort of imputing the innocence of the man, because under British law he was guilty of no crime. You can't tell foreign governments that they can come here and kill people who've committed crimes against their regimes, because then we cease to be a place of asylum for the decent people under all sorts of nasty despots. Anton is in Swindon. Anton, what's going on?
Yeah, hi there. Thank you for taking my call. Actually, I'm Russian myself, and kind of monitoring quite closely what's going on around this spy assassination. So I'm not quite clear why there is so much attention on this event. So actually, it looks to me like a internal Russian business. It's the one Russian spy, or let's say presumably a Russian spy, killed another Russian spy. So why there is so much?
Well, I think very simply, when you're in Swindon, do you live by British laws or Russian laws?
Well, it's British laws, yeah.
Well, there's your answer, Anton.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Explain you. Okay, about me, yes, that's correct, yeah. But
so Sergei Skripal, a servant of this nation, lives under British laws in this nation, with his daughter in this nation, and an attempt upon their lives, whoever it is undertaken by, is a matter of security and legality and law for this nation. I mean, I'm struggling to see what's confusing about this, Anton.
Well, confusing that these people, I mean, including Skripal, they made a choice at some point of their time to live outside of legal field, yeah? So
No. They defected so that they could live out. The same reason you're here, because it's better than Russia.
I mean, let's not talk about myself, yeah. But when he joined...
you are kind of the answer to your own question. You are here because Britain is better than Russia, and you expect to abide by British laws, not Russian laws, while you live here, which means if you get murdered, even if it's by another Russian, it's our business, mate.
All right. Okay. So we all understand why Skripal was looking for refuge in the UK, yeah? Because he
wasn't looking for refuge. He was coming home after operating on our behalf in incredibly dangerous circumstances. This would be his ideological and political home, because he's an enemy of the kind of oppression undertaken by people like Putin, whether during his days in the KGB or his days at the head of the world's biggest kleptocracy.
All right. Okay.
What else can I help you with?
He was not a KGB agent. Yes,
no, Putin was.
KGB. No. Okay, Putin. Skripal was working.
Because I said in his days, Putin's days as a KGB agent or as the head of the world's biggest kleptocracy. So I'm obviously talking about Putin, unless you're aware of Sergei Skripal's past as the head of the world's biggest kleptocracy.
Sorry, James.
That's all right. It's not your first language.
No. So what I'm trying to say. He was selling. He actually compromised a few dozens of Russian agents
and protected a few dozen British ones, which is why we look after him.
Okay, so how do you know if he protected?
No, how do you know he compromised Russian ones? It's almost as if you think he deserved to die because you're loyal to Russia despite living in Swindon.
No. What I'm trying to say that there was a lot of illegal activities before he took a refuge in the UK. Yeah, so
doesn't matter, mate. It doesn't matter. He's under the jurisdiction of British law. So we're back to where we started this conversation. As you live your life in Swindon, do you live by British legal frameworks? Do you live by British laws, or do you get to live by Russian laws?
All right. Okay. That's fine. No, yeah. It was. I totally agree. It's a legal act. Yeah, but the job people chosen is to work outside of legal field, including MI6 agents, yeah? So because there is a bribery act, they were paying money for a certain piece of information, so they definitely committed...
But you're going around in another circle. You're saying that because he lived the life of a spy, he deserves to die.
No, I'm not saying he deserves...
I'm saying, why is everyone so interested in it? It's just a small matter of internal Russian business. That was the phrase you used.
Okay, if you open a criminal news from yesterday. Yeah, there was a number of murders. Yeah, there was a murder of a woman in Twickenham. There was a family found dead in I think it's Suffolk. Yeah, so there are a lot of illegal murdering activities.
No, but this is. I think we've identified the problem, and I'm late for the news. I apologise. All murders are illegal, Anton, and I guess growing up in Russia, I can genuinely, and this will sound a little bit patronising, I can understand how you've arrived at the conclusion that some murders are legal and some murders aren't. They all are, and in Britain they all get investigated equally according to the crime, not according to the past of the victim. It's called equality before the law, and the sooner you get it in Russia, the safer the world will be.
This hour we're talking about Brexit. Is it really worth it? John texted earlier to say it most definitely is, come what may. 0345 606 0973. Do you agree? Donald Tusk, the EC president, the European Council president, has said in the last hour or so that it will be a free trade agreement rather than a continuation of the customs union or the single market because of the insistence of the UK government, and he says that will inevitably, even without adding tariffs to goods, that will inevitably mean a more costly, more complicated means of doing trade. Is it worth it? Andy in Cheltenham, is it?
Yes, bluntly. I mean, they don't want us to leave, Sheila. They want it to be as difficult as possible. They would love us to stay in the single market, and they're just going to try and make it difficult. And when you say about is it worth it, you know, it isn't a choice between Brexit or the status quo, because the status quo has kind of disappeared. You know, we know that they want much deeper integration. You had Martin Schulz talking about kicking people out if they don't sign up to it. And if you did cancel it at this stage, this country is going to become so viciously polarised. You know, what will emerge will make UKIP look like pussycats, because you're going to end up almost with like a polarised politics between momentum and a more extreme version of UKIP.
So did you hear, from Donald Tusk there, did you hear extreme rhetoric in your view? I don't mean far-right extreme or anything like that, but did you think he was just absolutely digging his heels in there? Because he talked about zero tariffs on goods. That's a positive, isn't it?
Well, zero tariffs on goods, it works very much in the EU's favour, doesn't it? We're talking about zero tariffs on the stuff we have a massive deficit with them on, but tariffs on the stuff that we sell more of. So in some ways, I don't see if that's a brilliant idea.
Well, he says he also said after that we should address services, huge part of our economy, reciprocal access to fishing, which I think was a bit of a red rag to a bull, if you'll forgive the forgive the metaphor.
It's not even really a single market in services now. You know,
in what sense?
Well, if you're, right, for an example, I know of a guy who has a building company, okay? Won a contract to get some work in France, but they wouldn't give him the insurance, so he had to give up on the contract. He couldn't get insurance from a British insurer. They weren't allowed to insure him there, and the French insurers wouldn't insure him either.
So are you quite relaxed about a free trade agreement which loosens economic ties instead of strengthening them, something else Donald Tusk pointed to?
Yeah, because that's the only thing that we can have now that really follows what the democratic vote was. You know, I know Chuka's going to be on in a bit. And to be honest, Chuka, I think his main priority is Chuka getting on TV and radio. You know, he doesn't seem to be that bothered about his constituents. He's bothered about him being at the front of everything. But if you do now cancel it or force a second vote, which, you know...
I have to say, Andy, sorry, let me just say that. You're not the first person to say, oh, Chuka just likes being on the telly or the radio. Politicians communicate with people on the television and the radio all the time. It is not unusual. It's actually vital.
But they are meant to write back to their constituents.
And they do.
Chuka doesn't.
And, well...
I believe Chuka's one of the worst for it. But what I was going to say is, you know, if we now avoid Brexit, you know, people are just going to become so much more divided. You know, I mean, all over Europe, you're getting more and more populists in the voting, you know.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. Yeah.
Now, I mean, when Macron was on the Andrew Marr show, he said if we were given a vote, the French people would vote out. So what are they doing? They're avoiding a vote. And what will happen? In the end, you'll get someone like Le Pen. You know.
Well, it almost has twice, hasn't it? Almost happened twice.
Status quo. And then what happens is the future is so much worse than the future would have been if you just let the people do what they want to do.
Although, if and it's, you know, I'm not saying Donald Tusk is right when he says things will inevitably be more difficult and that there are no winners. I mean, he might be right, but if Theresa May were to say at the end of the summer, the beginning of the autumn this year, if she were to say, look, the deal has now started to take shape, the realities are biting, And if you, as the British people, can trust me when I say we need to stay in the customs union or the single market, what would you say to that, Andy?
I would say that the government needs to fold because they ran on a manifesto of leaving both of them. You know, it's that simple. You know, Anna Soubry, God, she's got her seat running on a manifesto of leaving the customs union in a Leave constituency, and now she's going to challenge the government on it.
Okay, Andy, thank you. I wanted to fit Kevin in Doncaster in just before the news headlines. I think you have a short and sweet message, Kevin, about the EU.
Well, it's obviously crumbling. Great show. But yeah, look at Italy now. Just voted, you know, really towards the right. We've seen it in France, Austria, ourselves, in America. And yeah, I think it's just crumbling now. Donald Tusk. And, you know, these people live a first-class jet lifestyle. So, you know, obviously they want us to stay in because it pays their lifestyle.
So do you think you agree with my previous caller that without the kind of Brexit Theresa May is outlining, regardless of the economic hardships it might bring, we actually face what? Revolt?
Well, Mrs May's got a really difficult job. She's not a well lady, you know, she has diabetes. I know a lot of people live with diabetes.
Yeah, but she manages it very well. She's, you know, let's not minimise Theresa May just because she has diabetes.
She's doing a great job, but we need a really, really strong leader. Someone like Donald Trump, Jacob Rees-Mogg, probably, you know, who's going to tell these people that if you don't sign a deal, you know, before March 2019, then we're walking away.
All right, Kevin, thank you for your call. Kevin in Doncaster. Phil in Preston, hello.
Hi, Sheila. Well, I'd love to have asked Chuka Amuna just where he was in 1973 when we were, originally conned into this. And the answer to that is he wasn't born. And I think that a lot of the problems that we've got is we have a lot of people who have absolutely no knowledge of life other than the EU. But people like me who grew up in the 60s and 50s and 60s, we know how good this country was. It was a strong, trading, independent nation. And the people who dragged us into the common market, they had an agenda that was different to the one that was sold to us. We were part of a social experiment in Europe. If you can read some of the things that people have said in Europe, there was actually openly said about people not being made aware of exactly what was happening. This country was one of the greatest trading nations on the face of the earth since the Phoenicians.
But Phil, can I just stop you on that social experiment stuff? Isn't a huge amount of politics experimental socially? Loads of it is. You know, the huge transformation in the position of women in the country. You know, there are plenty of people who'd like to set the clock back on that. I'm not one of them, but there are plenty of people who'd like to set the clock back on that. That was a social experiment. No, of course not. But all kinds of. Well, we could talk about any policy you like, but you would accept that over the last 50, 60 years that there has been huge social change, and it's always experimental to start with, isn't it?
It has been a social change, but I wouldn't say
massive
it's a social experiment. No, I would say. I would say it's evolution. I would say it's modern people.
So would lots of pro-Europeans say that it was evolution, that we looked further beyond our shores to the EU for closer cooperation.
Further beyond our shores, we were a global nation, not an insular European nation. And just because we want to look back at the global world, we turned our back on the Commonwealth and we looked it within Europe. But I don't think. I personally, when this all kicked off, and I've watched this unravelling over the last 40 years, I've just had a very deep-seated, uncomfortable feeling about this. I do not dislike Europeans. I grew up in Liverpool like you did, and you know as well as I do, Liverpool is a very multinational city.
It's a really global city, yeah.
Oh, we've got the oldest and largest...
The world in one city, Phil. Remember the slogan?
Yes, I do. And, you know, we've got the oldest and biggest Chinatown in Liverpool, and we're proud of them.
It's the largest outside of London, isn't it, Chinatown?
Yeah, and we always knew when all the different ships were in, we saw people of different nationalities going on Birkenhead Market and St John's Market. We knew how big the world was in Liverpool, and I think that we actually shrank our vision by going into Europe. We were a big, wide-open country.
Respond to this text. This guy, that's you, this guy's talking rubbish. In the 70s, we had a 3-day week and no power, plus useless cars, etc., etc.
Well, that was the 1970s, and that was the trade unions and not the country, and it was not to do with Europe either.
OK, Phil, thank you. Phil in Preston. Let's hear from Debbie in Hertfordshire. You're furious, Debbie.
Yes, I was. The chap you was talking to, was his name Kaylin? I don't know if I'm pronouncing
Yes, Kaylin, yeah.
I mean, these people, they come on and they just scaremongering all the time. He actually quoted that currently people don't have to pay to phone abroad or drive into France. Well, that's completely untrue. You know, you pay in your contract, which now you can use if you go into Europe. And I'm sure that every insurance policy on the road, which allows you 60 days to drive into Europe, that has well been factored in. You know, these people, they quote, and people listening believe that. You know, it's absolute scaremongering, and I really wish that you would call them up on it. When they come up with something like that, if I know it, I'm just a housewife, I'm sure you must know it.
Well, I'm just giving Debbie, I'm giving people a voice like I'm giving you a voice now. I could pull you up on things and disagree with you. I don't always have to turn every conversation into a fight.
No, absolutely not. But you are the voice to put things right if they are misquoted. And
well, there's all kinds of claims of quotes and misquotes around Brexit, Debbie. It's not as plain as you might think. Thank you very much for your call, though, Debbie.
Do you think that the EU is going to move on these negotiating guidelines? Are you worried about the fact that they don't want to include financial services in a future trade agreement? And what do you make of their insistence that they should maintain access to UK fishing waters? Mike is in Hemel Hempstead. Mike, what's your view?
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. To be frank, I think I've got a blasted cheek.
In what way?
Well, they're saying we can't have financial access to their markets, and yeah, they want full unfettered access to our fishing waters. When are we going to grow a pair and say, look, enough is enough. This is on a long, winding road. Its only destination is WTO. It's not a case of if, but when.
Well, I think we're not quite there yet. I get as frustrated as you do by their language.
It's taking liberty off liberty after liberty. OK, we know it's negotiate speak, you know, and it's all part of the play. But we don't seem to be responding in kind. We don't seem to be saying to them, look, you keep demanding this, that and the other. You're saying we can't have this, that or the other. And so, you know, if you keep on, we will come out on WTO. So, you know, you're near the last chance saloon.
Well,
either play the game or forget it.
Let me put another thing to you. Harry Cole from The Sun had an interesting tweet earlier on today, and he said, well, to everybody who thinks that the EU are immovable in this, just look at the set of negotiating guidelines they issued last June for the talks which ended in December, and just look at what that agreement said. And there were quite a few examples in their negotiating guidelines in June which they completely gave way on in December, and yet the conventional wisdom is that they completely stuffed us over like a kipper.
The president seemed relaxed at the tariff signing ceremony, joking with one steelworker.
Let's arm wrestle.
Just moments before, another steelworker had wrestled with his emotions. Scott Sarge told the story of how his father lost his job due to imports.
I never forgot that, looking into his eyes in my household, what that does to a family.
What it did to the president was inspire a premature pronouncement.
Well, your father, Herman, is looking down. He's very proud of you right now. He's still alive. Oh, he is? Well, then he's even more proud of you. I thank you for the opportunity, for what you do.
Your father's Herman?
Herman, sorry. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, your father, Herman, is looking down. He's very proud of you right now.
He's still alive.
Oh, he is? Well, then he's even more proud of you. Then he's even more proud.
I'm sticking by my promise, even though some of you think I should be indulging a little bit more of my finely tuned anger. I'm not going to get angry with anyone. John was a lovely bloke. A lot of you picking up on that. And yet, someone who worked in construction persuaded that immigration and a housing shortage was a closer relationship than the construction industry and a housing shortage. Lisa responds to him by saying, I feel sorry John seems like a decent bloke, even though he thinks all the problems in this country are down to me, my husband and my kids, and people like us. I would still go for a pint with him. I guess I'll tell you where I am now, analogy fans. I am now accepting that the house is burning and just hoping we can save as much as possible. And that, it seems to me, was pretty much the flavour of Theresa May's Mansion House speech. But unfortunately, it's not us that get to decide what we can and can't save. But in many ways, it's the European Union who we now have to ask to help us minimise the damage we're doing to our own house, while the arsonists continue to run around high-fiving each other and talking about unaccountable elites. 10:39 is the time. I don't know where the morning's gone. I'll stay with this for as long as you want me to. Edward is in Luton. Edward, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hello, James. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Edward.
Right, hi there. Good to speak to you last. I've rang in a few times. I wanted to take you to task on this question about the economic hit that you continually press on about regarding what the UK has lost with regards to this exit of the EU. And I'll set the stage by saying that I am an importer. I've taken a huge hit, and I do employ a Polish worker as well. Okay?
How huge a hit have you taken?
Well, an enormous hit. I mean, probably 30 or 40% of my revenue has gone. But
okay.
Can I start with
30 or 40%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now,
and you voted to leave, did you?
My life, James, is not based on how much money I've got only.
No.
Okay?
No, you're very lucky. Nor's mine. But a lot of people can't think about anything else.
Yes. And Mohammed bin, can I give you the analogy because you're a fan of it? Okay?
Yes.
Mohammed bin Salman has been feted by the Queen and the establishment elite, and signing 150 billion pound deals for our arms and weapons, which, by the way, our German neighbours have refused to do.
Yes, I'm going to hurry you slightly. There are a lot of people waiting.
It enriches us.
Yes.
It enriches us. Okay, it enriches all of us. Okay, and that's the reason why we've done it, because it enriches us. But
we should start dealing heroin then.
Well, no, I for one would gladly give up the sale of our Typhoon jet, which enriches BAE and the other systems, is it meant that children weren't continuing to be crucified, or people weren't continuing...
Mate, I would as well. With respect, Edward, we did this on yesterday's show. I've got a full switchboard. I appreciate that you've struggled to get through in the past, but you're here now. Don't blow it. What's the point you want to make?
Right, the point I want to make is, along with lots of other European partners and lots of other European regions, the reason why the populist vote has risen in Italy and Germany and here, the reason why is because large swathes of the countries have been left behind, and the elite and the establishment, a la people who have lots of money...
Like the blokes who own the Telegraph, and the blokes who own the Ritz, and the bloke who owns the Times, and the people that run the Mail, and the people that own the Express, all of those pro-Brexit elitists.
And so-called Christian Liberal Democrat elite.
Yeah, mate, I'm really sorry, but I'm not learning anything from you at all. Reasons to be cheerful. Go.
Lots of those people in those large areas, like the north of England, Wallonia in Belgium, lots of areas are much happier at the prospect and the thought that there is going to be real change. There may be real change.
Why? Very briefly, Edward, give me your favourite example of the real change they're going to see.
Possibly, it might...
No, not possiblies, the certainlys.
You deal in possibly.
But I've got no reasons to be cheerful. You have. What are they?
Certainly, they have been listened to and have the prospect of being listened to.
What's going to improve in their lives?
I would imagine it's a possibility in the future that they will be listened to rather than left behind. Because
so what's going to improve in their lives?
The rise of fascism will occur again.
Oh, okay. It already is, mate, but it's rising among people who can't answer this question. Last chance, Edward. I'm not going to argue. Edward.
So you don't want to listen to them. You want them to remain the same. You want them to have the status quo. You want unelected officials in Europe to continue to govern the whole of Europe.
I don't know. Do you remember in the introduction when I said, let's avoid the empty slogans, let's avoid the meaningless soundbites, let's concentrate on demonstrable evidence? Mate, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm sorry. I'm not. No, I'm not, Edward. I'm not going to argue with you because I've set the parameters of the conversation. You give me reasons to be cheerful. You use words like possibility, imagine, left behind, far right, populist. I'm talking about the pound in the pocket. You can take a 30 to 40% hit to your revenues and keep bouncing along. I'll tell you now, you patronise the people in the communities you describe when you imagine, even implicitly, that they could take a 30 to 40% hit to their already paltry income and be anything other than poverty-stricken. They'll have a voice. They'll have a voice, mate, but they won't have a pot to pee in. 10:54 is the time. Marcus is in Westminster. Marcus, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. I'm in Westminster because I'm MP for Yeovil in Somerset.
Welcome.
Hi. And I just thought it would be great to call in because I respect your show and what you do, and I think you're a really good journalist and able to engage with facts.
Is there a big butt coming, Marcus?
No. Actually, there isn't. So I was encouraged by the sort of tone of the start of your programme, which I listen to quite often, to sort of try to have a rational sort of a conversation about.
Well, let's crack that with respect. Let's crack on with it because I wouldn't want people to think MPs got special treatment or extra time.
So basically, I was in the US and Canada with the International Trade Committee the week before last.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I examined Greg Hans, who's the trade minister in our committee yesterday, and one of the things that I was pointing out was that some of the numerical assumptions that people have been making about effectively they've been saying how little benefit there will be to the UK economy of potentially doing trade deals around the rest of the world just don't really stack up when you look at the numbers behind them.
But they have to be better than what we've currently got, don't they?
Well, look, it's
No, I won't look. They just do, because in order to persuade people to do something, you have to persuade them that they'll end up in a better place than where they started. And you don't need me to remind you that Donald Trump's just announced a trade war.
Well, my position has always been that net things in the medium term would be effectively around the same as where they are now.
What about in the short term?
Some things will be a bit less than they were before, and other things will be more.
Would it be unfair of me to ask? Hang on a minute. Can you refer me in any way to pre-referendum pronouncements when you said things will be worse than they were before in some areas?
So when I made a speech in the House of Commons before the vote, I was very careful to set out the net effects. There were some positives and some negatives.
But these would be economic impact assessments, wouldn't they? So where are things going to be worse?
Actually, economics. A lot of it wasn't economic.
And we're talking. Listen, I don't want this to get fractious because I am short of time. But I'm looking for reasons to be cheerful, and saying that we can do more trade with a country that's just announced a trade war is. It's low on my dial of cheerfulness.
For example, the Aussies, when they did their free trade agreement with the US, they vastly underestimated what that would be worth to them. They've actually seen their trade increase by 50%.
But you lead me again to the question of how that is going to be better than what we've currently got. I mean, we can talk over each other until the cows come home, but
it'll make up for any extra costs of what we do with the EU.
You do know that Australia is on the other side of the world and the European Union has a land border with the United Kingdom.
It's also a long way from the US.
Yes, it is, but we're not the US, and the US was never in the largest single market in the world, and we're leaving it, you say, to benefit from being able to trade with Australia while diminishing our ability to trade with Germany.
So just to give an example, the 0.2%, which the Treasury has said is what the potential value of doing with the US, doing a deal with the US might be, is about $5 billion.
Yes, and in the context of the European Union?
Well, in
your own government's impact assessment. Your own government's impact. Oh, okay.
The insurance market in the US writes over $1 trillion of business every year. That's just one sector.
That's because they don't have a health service.
There is huge opportunity.
That's because they don't have a health service.
Health is actually a pretty small proportion of that. There's a lot more in the property.
Okay. I'm grateful for the call. If I was to annotate what you've told me, and I am insisting that you obey the same rules as everybody else who rings the programme, reasons to be cheerful. You've given me Australia's trade deal with America being a bit better than they expected, or even a lot better than they expected. I don't want to put that words in your mouth. That's what you've got, Marcus Fish, MP for Yeovil.
One example. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have a great day. What do you do now? Elected members of Parliament, look, we're walking away. Both sides now concede. His own Prime Minister concedes it's going to do us economic damage. Where are the pluses? Well, America signed a trade deal with Australia, and it's gone a bit better than some people predicted. What are we going to do? We're moving out of the largest single market on the planet. I don't know, I suppose the silver lining would be you could almost detect in his voice a knowledge of how ridiculous he was sounding. Shane's in Fulham. Shane, reasons to be cheerful.
Hello, mate. I apologise for not being a female.
You could have pretended.
Listen, yeah, we do have reasons to be cheerful. I wanted to call in to tell you about back in the days of apartheid in my country, the world decided to cut us off, and we had no one wanted to trade with us. They wanted us to punish the country, but instead of punishing us, it actually gave the country the chance to boost the economy. Local businesses took off like crazy. It's not always international trade, and these globalists are not always good for the economy of the country. I think this will now give local businesses a chance to pick up and to boost the economy. There's more reasons to be cheerful. There's a lot of reasons to be cheerful.
Don't just keep saying that. Tell me how.
Now we know how desperate they are to fish in our waters. We can use this as a bargaining chip. We can say to them...
But the whole referendum was fought on them fishing in our waters. It was all they had. But go on, we'll use that as a bargaining chip. We'll say what?
We'll say, you fish in our waters and we'll take our borders back. Because at the moment, the borders are our number one priority.
Mate, you were telling me about how we'd have an economic recovery that was locally sourced, and now you're talking about borders.
Well,
so tell me about the improvements to our local economy using sanctions-era South Africa as our guide. Crikey, I thought the American-Australian parallel was eccentric. But, OK, so what can we learn from sanctions-era apartheid South Africa?
I'm just taking lessons from history.
I'm taking lessons from you. So how will our economy improve as a result of leaving the European Union, which is what you just told me would happen?
Well, if they don't want to trade, if certain corporations, if multinationals don't want to trade with us, and we have the local means of production, then we can supply and we
can we put some flesh on this bone? I mean, the kind of thing you're thinking of. I mean, bearing in mind multinationals, you mean companies rather than countries. But if they decide it's less attractive to trade here or to manufacture here than it would be in the world's largest single market, we can plug that gap and replace those jobs by doing what?
By manufacturing for us, by self-sustaining.
Just only using stuff that we don't have to import.
Exactly.
So what sort of manufacturers do you have in mind, Shane?
Well, Britain's full of good talents.
Well, yes, that's an interesting selection of words, but none of them answer the question I asked. What kind of manufacturing do you envision us being able to lead the world at without importing anything, and that we're not currently doing?
So we're not manufacturing anything. Manufacturers.
The stuff that we're currently doing is irrelevant to your vision. Your vision is of the stuff we're not currently doing, but big multinational companies are, that we'll be able to do on a local basis without importing anything. I'm just wondering what you had in mind.
Well, I don't know, James, but I'm trying to give you reasons to be to be cheerful. Yeah, we're getting our laws back, we're getting our borders back.
No, but we always had our laws, and we always had our borders, and we always had our.
Never.
Well, okay. Well, as I said, I'm not going to have old hackneyed arguments about empty slogans today. I'm talking specifically about the economic impact of this political decision, which you say will have positives, and I'm very politely pointing out that so far you've been unable to name a single one.
Might not, James. It might not, James, but it might do. I can't tell the future, and neither can you. But I don't think there's any reason to be pessimistic here. I think it's...
Well, hang on. Theresa May and Donald Tusk have both said that the economic impact will be negative. The government's own modelling has, in some areas, 4 times the negative impact of the last recession, largely in the poor areas that voted leave. So I appreciate that economic impact assessments aren't crystal balls by any stretch of the imagination. But your reason to be cheerful is that we will be able to replace what is currently done on the international stage with local manufacturing. And I was just hoping you'd say something like bicycles.
Well, James, I did say to you that Britain's full of talent. And I might not need to name them individually, but there's a lot of talent in Britain. There's a lot.
This is it. And of course,
not only bicycles.
The point you miss, of course, is that you're supposed to be explaining to me how leaving the European Union would increase the amount of talent in Britain.
Well, James, I'm just trying to tell you that there are reasons to be cheerful. It's not.
I haven't heard one yet, Shane, and I promise you I've been listening really closely.
Well, South Africa was cut off from the rest of the world, and the economy boomed.
Unfortunately, history suggests that the economy didn't boom.
Well,
but anyway, all right, I'll take that. So the reason to be cheerful is that if we're lucky, we'll be like apartheid-era South Africa while it was suffering from international sanctions. That's our sunny upland.
Not at all, not at all.
That's exactly what you said.
That's not what I said at all. What
do you think you said?
Being protectionist can sometimes be an advantage to the economy.
And which leading British politician has suggested that we should be protectionist as opposed to outward-looking and doing more trade with the rest of the world?
Well, leaving the EU is certainly a protectionist move.
But all the people that have promoted it have said it will free us up to do more trade with other countries. You heard the Conservative MP talking about Australia a minute ago, closer to your home country than it is to mine. So just to recap, and I'm as I said, no arguments, no shouting today. You think that we should look at apartheid-era South Africa as a reason to be optimistic about leaving the European Union, and you think that we can replace a lot of what is currently done on the international manufacturing stage in this country with locally sourced manufacturing. But at the moment, and I appreciate it's a pressured environment when you ring a radio station, at the moment you can't think of a single example of what kind of sector that might involve.
Well, all the doom and gloom is not always, it doesn't always turn out so bad. Protectionism can sometimes have advantages for the economy. I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, now you're just repeating yourself. So we'll agree that that's what you've said. Look to apartheid-era South Africa as a shining example of what we could hope for in our best-case scenarios, and we'll be okay because of manufacturing, although I can't think of a single example of what we might manufacture more effectively than we currently could.
Learn lessons from history.
So in history, can you think from history of an example of anyone ever signing a free trade agreement that reduces the amount of free trade they can do with their co-signatories?
Well, as it stands right now, we're taking the borders back. We're taking our laws back.
But now you're just being a parody of a sort of Brexit half-wit. You're just saying words.
We don't know what's going to happen with the economy.
But mate, the question was simple. You said learn lessons from history, so I asked you to refer me to a free trade agreement signed by signatories who would be free to do less trade than before.
No, James, I'm not a politician. You're
not a politician, you're not a historian, you can't see the future, you can't answer any of my questions, but you think that we should look to apartheid-era South Africa. Just high five, Shane, seriously. 11:38 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. As not for the first time, we attempt to find out what will be better than it is now. And the answer is nothing. So why are we doing it? Julie is in Frankfurt. Happy International Women's Day, Julie.
Well, thank you so much.
And you are an international woman. How very apt. It's fantastic. What do you want to say?
I've lived and worked in the EU for many, many years. I was at the Nouvelle Sorbonne in 1974, where I met Emma Thompson. I've worked since 1999 as a head of 5 international schools. I have a little insight into what goes on in living and working in the EU.
Well, so do we.
Yes, we do indeed. But are you aware that in the EU, in every
I've lived pretty much my entire life in the EU.
Well, I believe it's in the United Kingdom.
Which is in the European Union, Julie.
Well, fair enough. So I've lived in an.
Crikey, what sort of schools did you teach in?
Are we splitting hairs now, or are we having
on whether or not the United Kingdom is in the European Union? No, we're not. We're splitting hairs. It's I don't understand. You're sort of claiming you've got a special perspective because you live in the European Union.
Yes, I do, because I know
but so
what
do
happens when. Oh, do you really? So you know what happens in Switzerland, Italy, Germany, France. Every time you move round, exactly what you have to do.
I have visited all of those countries. I have visited all of those countries.
The last few
West
years
London.
have pontificated on just about everything outside your sphere.
What's the right answer? Yes or no?
Well, do you know what happens if you move to a European country to live and work?
Yes.
Okay, tell me what happens.
Well, you start off in one country, and then you move to the other one, and then you live and work there.
Oh,
under freedom of movement. Under freedom of.
And about registration.
Well, the rules are different from country to country.
No, it isn't necessarily different.
But it is.
Different.
Yes.
But in France, Italy, and Germany, there's a different process.
Well, precisely. That's what I meant by different.
People, do listen for a change, James. Listen to somebody who knows what they're talking about.
5 minutes ago, you were under the impression that the United Kingdom wasn't in the European Union, Headmistress.
No, I wasn't at all.
You called it splitting hairs.
Not at all.
No, okay, let's start again.
You're pathetic now.
Yeah, you're right. I apologise.
You are being pathetic.
I completely agree.
When you get a female caller, you absolutely love that opportunity to just.
You got me. Bang to rights. Because all the male callers that I've had today, we've rolled out the red carpet and tickled them under the chin.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. That South African chap before, I couldn't have been more sycophantic to him if I tried.
Right. Let's get down to facts and stop this silly school playground business going on at the moment.
That's your comfort zone, not mine.
Really? I suggest you listen.
Well, you have to talk.
When you move to a country outside the UK, whether in Europe or Switzerland or Norway...
Switzerland's in Europe, so is Norway.
To register...
They're both in Europe.
...a local authority, which means they know who you are, where you are, and exactly what you're doing in the country. In England or in the United Kingdom, you're not required to do that.
So it's a British government rule rather than a European Union rule?
That's the point I'm trying to make.
It's a British government decision not to properly...
down a little bit and stop being a chicken little. And just listen to people who know what they're talking about.
Do you know what? I'm going to listen to people that know what they're talking about. I'm not sure you're one of them, but I'm going to be quiet for 2 minutes now and just let you speak. Go.
I've lived in Europe since 1999.
So have I.
I suggest I know far more about what's going on in Europe than you do.
But I've lived in Europe since 1972.
Oh, bless your little heart. And I've lived in it since 1956.
Fantastic.
And I remember the ERM collapse. And I remember all the pre-1975 politicians and everything that was going on then.
Yes, I bow to your knowledge of the politicians and everything that was going on then.
Because you weren't born, and you are really a very arrogant little man.
I'm 6'1".
Oh, well, I'm 5'6". Take me on.
Well, at what, Julie? Uno? Chess?
You like.
Julie, I bear you no malice. I bear you no ill will, but I am gonna stop you from embarrassing yourself further with the greatest of affection and regret. I've got no idea why you rang me. No idea at all. When we tire ourselves out explaining how immigration rules were a Westminster decision rather than a European Union imposition. I don't know why you're in such a foul mood. If it's anything to do with me, I apologise, and I hope your day is on the up from this moment onwards. And happy International Women's Day. Natalie is in Dagenham. Natalie, question or answer?
Question.
Yes?
Where does the saying fast asleep come from?
The same place as stuck fast comes from.
I've never heard of that one.
Rubbish.
What was it?
Stuck fast. You're stuck fast in that hole, you are.
Stuck fast?
Stuck, as in stuck, stick, stuck, fast.
I've never heard of that.
How old are you?
44.
You have lived for 44 years in these islands and you've never heard the phrase stuck fast?
No. stuck. Yeah, I'm stuck.
Yeah, stuck fast. If you're really stuck, what are you? You're stuck fast.
Well, how are you fast? How can you be stuck fast?
It doesn't mean fast as in quick. It's an old English word with a different meaning. It means it's closest thing to very. So if you're asleep, you're asleep. If you're fast asleep, you're very asleep. If you're stuck...
You're not, you're soundo.
What?
If you're fast asleep,
yeah.
You're soundo. Not fast asleep, you're soundo.
You're soundo?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what that means.
See, I didn't know what stuck fast meant.
What's soundo?
Soundo.
Oh, as in sound asleep?
Yes.
Yeah, well, sound asleep and fast asleep mean the same thing.
What part of it is fast?
It means very. It's Anglo-Saxon.
So that's not a good question, then, is it?
It's a brilliant question. It's an even better answer. Think of another one. Is there another one? Oh, there's 3 people working on this programme. I'm doing all the heavy lifting myself. Stuck fast, fast asleep. Another use of fast, meaning extremely or very, that Natalie might have come across in her 44 years on this earth.
Come on, help me out.
Come on, help her out. Help a lady out. Fast, anyone? Fast? Fast?
I like that.
Steadfast. No, that doesn't work. Stop saying silly words. You've never heard of steadfast? What are the schools like in Dagenham?
I grew up in Walthamstow. Bloody terrible.
Give her a round of applause. She didn't even ring in with an answer. Should we boycott the World Cup in protest at the alleged state-sponsored assassination attempt that unfolded in Salisbury at the weekend? Crikey, sometimes you don't see the stories coming, do you? 19 minutes after 10, and this is not a topic that... Well, I don't think it demands a degree of expertise, because I ain't got none. I'm hoping that you have a stronger handle on it than I do, so I can borrow your opinion and pass it off as my own, henceforth. Alex is in Enfield. No pressure, Alex. What do you think?
Oh, pressure's on. I haven't spoken to you a long time, James. Look, I can reel off 6 things that the Russians have done, because even when my car wasn't working the other day, I thought it could be the Russians.
No, that's silly. And also, we said we were going to categorically avoid a conversation about whether or not the Russians were responsible on the grounds that MI6 probably knows more about this than Alex in Enfield does. So if they were, would it be a reasonable reprisal? Is it reprisal or reprisal? To pull out of the World Cup?
Well, this is my point, James, that there are, if it's not... There are a whole heap of other reasons or excuses why we could pull out of the World Cup. There's the geopolitics in Syria. There's the Ukraine.
Okay,
there's the UN
time lucky, mate. If the Russians did it, would it be a reasonable reprisal or response from us to pull out of the World Cup in Russia?
I've already given you my answer. I said I don't...
Okay, that's great then. Thanks for that.
Brian's called from Lymm in Cheshire and John in Northampton. Brian, hello.
Hi.
You've been to North Korea?
That's right, yes. Went about 3 years ago. Fascinating journey. One of the best holidays of my life.
Talk me through it. How did you get in for a start?
Well, sorry?
How did you get in?
There's a special travel company. You fly to Beijing and you hang around for a couple of days while you get clearance, and then they whisk you in. And you're here on a guided tour of about 10 people, top and tailed, a guide at the front and a guide at the back. But everybody met. We're as always. I've been to a lot of bizarre places. People are great as always. That was my experience.
But were you conscious? I'm not suggesting the North Koreans aren't great, that their leaders aren't, but the people have to live with that, don't they? What pressures did you feel under in terms of being followed, being monitored, being restricted, being controlled? Because you were all of those things.
Yes, without doubt. Yes, without doubt. But again, people were great. But my point of rang in is you're talking about, there's a couple of issues, in my opinion, going on at the moment. The sanctions, I can't see how they could have any effect. The people haven't got anything. The food it's a lottery. Every morning you have what they might have, some boiled potatoes and a bit of pickled cabbage. That'll be your breakfast, if that's what they've got. They might have some eggs. The food is utterly, by our standards, most unappealing.
Yeah. Well, and you'll know, if you've been there was that appalling famine there some years ago, wasn't there? Deliberate, avoidable famine.
Well, how was it avoidable? Isn't that all part of the sanctions?
No, because he deliberately starved out the north of his country.
Who did?
the previous leader, Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, I think I'm right in saying?
Yeah, he starved out in the north.
Of his own country.
He is the north.
No, of his own country.
You're coming at it, if you don't mind me saying, a bit of an obscure angle. What's happening? No, you have to go right back to its history.
It's not obscure. You're telling me the food's bad, and I'm telling you it was a few years ago. It was a bit worse than that. There were babies starving to death, as in Ireland.
Are you using me to get your view across, or do you want to hear my view? I mean,
I'm having a conversation with you, Brian.
No, you're not. You're using me as a platform to get your views across, and not letting me get my views across.
No, Brian. My view. I know, and I'm interested to hear it, and I'm sharing a conversation with you off the back of that. My view isn't that North Korea had a famine some years ago. It is a fact that North Korea had a famine some years ago.
No one's disputing that.
Well, you seem to be picking a fight with me ever since I said it. I don't know why.
No. Well, just let me finish speaking for just once. Why did Korea get into...
Keep going till half past if you like, Brian.
Why did Korea get into such a mess? It was invaded by the Americans. It was invaded, I forget what the date, 1950 sometimes. It was a unified country. America was terrified of it going socialist, so America invaded it. They got pushed down, they came up halfway up, invaded it again, and divided the country. There's never been an end, the declaration of end of war, only an armistice, a ceasing of fire. Before the Americans invaded it, it was a Japanese colony exploited by the Japanese. America then invaded Vietnam. We can go on and on where they all invaded. Who are these? These people can't trust anybody. You can't blame them. You can't blame them. They saw after Cambodia, Vietnam, Korea, they then brought in a despotic, nasty ruler in Iran, the Shah of Iran. I'm getting a bit excited here, I'm sorry.
I can tell.
Yeah,
well, you told me not to speak, so I'm not speaking. I'm just letting you give me your lecture on North Korea.
Tell you, and then the Americans brought down all the elected government in South America, creating three juntas, a shocking fascist dictator, Pinochet, who killed tens of thousands of kids because they were socialists. Of course, but I think, do you know what I think, briefly? You'll like the next bit, you don't like anything else. I think he's playing the Israeli game. He doesn't want peace, what's his name, Kim Il-jung. He wants talks and talks and talks. The longer it goes on, the more he can get his ducks in a row and get ready to repel any American aggression. Just like Israelis getting bigger and bigger countries. They have peace talks to prolong their expansionist ideas. That's where I come from.
OK, Brian, thanks. I was a bit afraid to interrupt and attempt a conversation, but those were Brian's views, everybody, on North Korea, where he has been. Now he's in Lim, in Cheshire. Very nice little place that is, too. Two people I can say with some certainty are nothing like me are Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump, President of the United States and North Korea. They're going to meet. Is that a good thing? Is it a victory for Kim Jong-un that the American president has finally said yes, or an American president has finally said yes to meetings, or is it a smart move on the part of the American president? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Tony has done that already from Enfield. Hi, Tony.
Hello there. Yes, I think it's a great idea for talks between the United States and North Korea. Isn't it sad how we condemn every country on the planet that, you know, their leaders are bad and their people are starving? If people are hungry in North Korea, that's because of Western foreign policy. It's called
No,
embargoes,
it isn't, Tony.
trade embargoes.
It isn't, Tony.
Oh, yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is. If you look, this is what we do. We use food, medicines and life-saving technology as weapons against the poorest of countries. 30 million Americans live in abject poverty. Can you believe that?
Are you really going to be an apologist for Kim Jong-un and his father before him? Are you really? I mean, look at that regime, Tony. You can have as many problems as you like with the British government, with Western governments. Look at that regime and tell me that you, hand on heart, you aren't apologising for absolute evil.
Well, I support Putin. I think we should have talks with Putin. All this anti.
Well, they're different things. You support him or you want talks with him. They're two. Well, no, you're conflating the two things. They're two very different things.
No, I'm talking about Western foreign policy. The Americans have backed up Pinochet, Marcos family, Somoza family, Batista, Suharto.
You're doing what Brian from Lim did earlier on, and just going around the world and naming leaders and regimes you don't like. Focus on North Korea for me.
Sheila, North Korea. Look, It's one country. The Americans, the West tried to divide it like Vietnam, and they lost the war in Vietnam. The Americans went home with 60,000 bodies, somebody's son, somebody's brother, all because they thought Vietnam was going down the socialist route. If you look at the American foreign policy since World War II, Sheila, just give me 10 seconds. Vietnam,
you can have longer than that. Fire away, Tony. I don't agree with you, but fire away.
Sudan, Somalia, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Lebanon, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Chile, Grenada, Chad, Panama, Cuba, Ecuador.
Is this list on your fridge, Tony?
No, I get this information from the cab because I talk to politicians in I drive a licensed London cab, Sheila. And when I get MPs in the cab, I say to them, do you think we'd have bombed Iraq if they were growing bananas? What do you think, cabby? What do you think? Oh, no, sir, oil. And we're anyone Sheila, if you and I stood up anywhere in the world with the support of our people and we says no to the free market, capitalist system, World Bank, IMF, and the corporates of America, you and I would not be able to do that. Would be demonised, death squads, military coups, trade embargoes. All we have to do in the
death squads, what, here in the UK? Sorry? Theresa May would send out death squads, would she?
Yes, we're
would she?
Of it, aren't we? Come on. I mean, who supplied the Americans?
She can barely go on a girls' night out, let alone organise a death squad.
Sheila, who supplied the Americans with Agent Orange?
Oh, Tony, look, I know you're a communist, and I know, but come on.
The Communist Party. I've never voted.
I didn't say what you voted for. I said what you are.
Sorry. Well, I believe in social justice. Jesus was a communist. You talk about religion on your
Jesus was a communist. Jesus was a communist.
You don't think it'd be...
I guarantee you... Gosh, I can't believe I'm trying to speak for Jesus. I guarantee you Jesus was not a communist, Tony.
What was he then, a conservative?
Oh, God. Can you try and take your glasses off for a second and understand that 2,000 years ago you can't place modern day verbiage on top of that period in history, whether it's about Jesus or anybody else?
Oh yes, we do.
I'll tell you what Jesus absolutely existed and believed in, more than believed in, spoke about endlessly in the gospel, which is the innate value of the human individual in the eyes of God. Communism does not believe that. It believes the opposite of that.
No, you got that wrong, Mike.
No, I haven't got it wrong.
That wrong. Look, every church is the house of God. We've got homeless people 200 yards sleeping in doorways, and that's the house of God. I mean,
Tony.
I believe there was this chap called Jesus. Was he the Son of God? No. All religion is man-made, and they use religion. Don't we use religion? God bless America, or we're a Christian country. This ain't a Christian country. It's a capitalist country. Look, we've got children, going hungry. 1 million children living in poverty in the 21st century, and we're Great Britain. Never put the word great in front of Britain again, Sheila. I mean, that's laughable now, isn't it?
This is much more interesting to me than North Korea, whether Jesus was a communist or not, to be honest with you. I know to my bones that Jesus was not a communist. But
he was a communist. Of course he was a communist. He loved thy neighbour as thyself. Do you really think he'd be voting for Theresa May or Tony Blair?
You think that's communism, love thy neighbour as thyself? Do you think Joseph Stalin interpreted it that way?
Yeah, what we need.
Love thy neighbour till he or she disagrees with me, then send them to a gulag. That kind of communism.
Abolition of privatisation, means of production, back to society. That's what we need.
What did Jesus say about that? What did Jesus say about private property?
He would have supported.
Would he?
Okay. Yes, okay. He opened the doors to the house of the Lord. So but I was baptised Catholic because of my Italian background. But I've always asked questions. Where did God come from?
Nothing wrong with questions. I'm worried about some of the answers you're coming up with, Tony.
Well, that is an answer. Where did God come from? They can't tell you. We've been here for 4.5 billion years, the Earth. What was God doing all that time? What a mess he's made. What an absolute mess. I think we should put God on trial. There should be a judgment day for God and say, look what you've done. You've introduced all these diseases,
Tony.
hatred,
Think of your family.
Sorry?
Think of your family.
I do. I've got 4 lovely grandchildren, yes.
Well, that's nice. That's good.
Can I go now?
Oh, you could have gone at any time, but I was just letting you. No, that's fine. I was just letting you talk because I believe in human liberty, Tony. Because I'm not a communist, which is why you could have talked forever, as far as I'm concerned. But actually, go on.
Sorry, one last thing. I've been to Cuba 32 times.
I don't doubt it.
48% of their elected government are women.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Tony. Tony in Enfield. I think we'll leave it there. Amanda in Ealing, you are uncomfortable about this, aren't you? You think that people haven't contributed enough to have the right. When would you regard someone as having contributed enough?
It's not that I feel that they haven't contributed enough. I think it's like, I'm going to put a scenario to you. Say I'm your best friend.
Yes.
And I move into your house.
Yes.
You let me stay. There's no contract. You let me stay. I stay for 10 years with you. Does that automatically give me the right to go on the deeds of your house? No, it doesn't. I've contributed to your house. I've given you money. It's not like, per se, I've given you for the mortgage. I've just contributed to your house. It doesn't give me the right to say, well, now I want to be on your deeds. It doesn't work that way. I think if you are born here, that lady before, I feel sorry for her children. They were born here. They should get the right to a British passport. They should get the right to vote. I totally agree with that. But I don't believe that anyone that comes to the country, you come here, whether you're working, whether you're contributing loads of money, you're still a visitor to our country.
Forever, even like Helmut after 40 years and Christina after 20 years.
Yeah, I just don't feel that you can. Anybody can move, because like now it would be like everybody from the EU would not want us to leave, right? So if they actually
would they? I mean, you're presuming that every single EU citizen A thinks the EU is marvellous and B votes in the same way.
Well, you're going to find a lot of families don't want to get rid of that and shut the borders and all those things because they're going to say, well, then my family wouldn't be able to come in later if they're still in Europe. Do you see what I mean?
But the family can come anyway as Europeans, Amanda. They don't need their relative in the UK to get them over here.
No, but I'm saying because of the borders, if we tightened the borders and people couldn't come, like as easy, then people who are here that now would be given a vote on Brexit if they did it again, they would automatically vote.
Okay, so you take a really strong line that if you are foreign, not born here, no matter how long you live here, no matter what your contribution to this nation, you must never be given a vote in a general election.
Unless you're part of the Commonwealth. I got that. I get that.
Well, forget the Commonwealth. I'm talking about EU citizens.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it should ever happen.
A council vote, should we get rid of that? Should they have a vote in the council? Because they do.
No, I don't think... No, local stuff, fine.
Why? What's the difference? What's the difference? We're a tiny country. What's the difference?
Because the difference is, when we're voting for things that are huge to do with our country, a lot of people that have come from other countries are going to vote for the best of their other countries, not for our country.
I think people forget... I wish you'd called sooner, actually, because I have to finish in a minute with you, but I think people forget how vital council elections are. The turnout would suggest that they do, but some of the decisions made at council level absolutely affect your daily life. Policing, to name one, social care, housing, affects your daily life much more than the national election.
You know what, it kind of threw me, but I think you actually hit a nail on the head for me even. For the area I come from, local elections for our MPs, in my area, one MP keeps winning, not because you're the greatest MP, because I don't even know his name properly, but because he does for his people, and I'm being very open to say that on live radio, but it's very true. People who live in my area don't even know who he is because he supports the people that come from his country.
Which country?
Thing to say. I'm not actually sure what, but it's an Asian country. He comes from Southwold. It sounds racist. By the way, I'm mixed race. I am mixed race. I have no problem where you're from.
Last time I checked, people weren't forced to vote in this country because we have secret ballot, don't we? So people can vote any way they like in this country, thank goodness, Amanda. I know you say you're mixed race, you're not racist, but you're very resistant to the idea of any foreigner, no matter how much they contribute, no matter how long they're here, really having a part to play in the nation, whether you're talking about the vote or anything else. That's what I'm hearing from you anyway.
I know he's a moron.